Friends, welcome to today's video. I've got a cup of coffee here and I'm ready to talk about an incredible book that's going to help you become a better pianist. It has for me. It's been so helpful to think through teaching, to think through performing. Whether you're a beginner, intermediate, or advanced player, stick around for this book review. In the meantime, go ahead and subscribe to this channel. I'd love to hear from you in the comment section as we produce more and more videos. I would love to hear from you as to how we can improve, as to how we can really help you in your exploring of the piano and its amazing literature, its teaching, its culture. So stick around for today's review. So today's review is about Notes from the Pianist Bench by Boris Berman. Now, Boris Berman is a piano professor at the Yale School of Music in Connecticut, of course, at Yale University. And this book came out in the year 2000, and it is a fabulous resource for you as a pianist and you as a teacher. Just one little caveat before we get started here. It's not really a book review. It's just saying how much I love this book and how I think it can really help you to become a better pianist and teacher. So just a little bit more about Boris Berman. He's a piano professor at the Yale School of Music. He's a scholar. Most notably, he has editions of Prokofiev's sonatas. He's a fantastic teacher, and he's taught all over the world. Have I met him? No, I have not met him. I would love to meet him because this book has helped me in so many ways, again, to be a better pianist and a better teacher. There's so much to get to, but this book is divided into two sections, all right? So part one is called In the Practice Room. It's got a bunch of chapters that outline what he's going to be talking about in this section called In the Practice Room. And then in part two, he's got this section called Shaping Up a Performance. Shaping Up a Performance. I love this division between practicing in your practice room and in your studio, focusing on fundamentals like pedaling, like phrasing, like articulation, like rhythm, and then practicing performing. You've probably heard this. You've probably heard this before, that comedians write on stage. Sure, they go through a laborious process of writing out their material, memorizing their material, but when they get to the club and when they get on stage, they see how the comedy works and flows and resonates with an audience. In the same way, pianists need to practice in their studio, but they also need to practice performing, getting the nerves out, to put it frankly. We got to get the nerves out. We got to get all the kinks out in the final product as we share our amazing art. So I love that this book divides its two sections into In the Practice Room and Shaping Up a Performance. Those two parts are critical to being a great pianist, and a pianist that understands that we're practicing, sure, but we're also practicing performing and practicing to be better communicators of this amazing music that we steward throughout our lives. Okay, so in the first part, he's got a bunch of chapters that outline what happens in the practice room. He's got sound and touch, technique, articulation and phrasing, matters of time, pedaling, and then practicing. So 6 chapters in this book that deal with sound and touch, technique, articulation and phrasing, matters of time, pedaling, and practicing. And in each of these sections, he gives practical advice as to how to become better at all of those things. And every day, we need to be better at our fundamentals when we practice and when we get ready to share our art. Also of note in the technique section is the fact that he looks at repertoire and difficulties within the repertoire to warm up to practice slowly. There are some parts in my pieces that I'm playing right now that I warm up with at a slower tempo so that when I get to it in the meat of the practicing, it's there and it's warmed up and it feels great. He also recommends technical exercise books from Tausig to Brahms. He loves Brahms, and in fact he says that it's overwhelmingly musically satisfying to the other technical exercise books that are out there. He also talks about Hanon. These exercises are incorporated into his warm-up routine. He also talks about this arpeggio pattern that I warm up with since I was taught by Nina Svetlanova. And it's a fantastic warm-up pattern with arpeggios. He has patterns for scales. He has patterns for double thirds and sixes, separating scales by a tenth, separating them by a sixth, separating them by a third. There are so many ways that you can enrich your technical expertise. Practicing chromatic scales, practicing sixths, practicing double thirds. All of these things are so important as we develop to be all that we can be as pianists and teachers. I also just want to comment here real quick. You can also add in these seventh chords, right? And diminished chords. This is so important to our repertoire. And now we're starting to introduce, right, pentatonic scales and blues scales and other kinds of scales, modes. There are so many things that we can explore with our students to make their practicing that much more fun and enjoyable. I just want to highlight the technique part, okay? The technique part. And on this channel, we're going to be dealing with this because I think it's a crisis with beginner and intermediate pianists, okay? You've got to work on scales, arpeggios, chords, and the like, okay? So in here, in this book, he firmly says we need to be working on these aspects, and he's got the fingerings, for example, for double thirds. Oh boy, double thirds. He's also got fingering for arpeggios, long arpeggios and short arpeggios. He's got formula pattern recommended in there, okay? And so if you're a teacher and you're teaching beginning and intermediate students, let's start them on scales, chords, arpeggios. They need this to succeed in the literature that we play. They need this. You can make it fun. You can make it fantastically fun with different kinds of rhythms and making up their own melodies and chords and having a great time learning these foundational technical structures that are going to serve us so well in sight reading and in learning the music that we have. And again, I'm not even getting close to what he shares in this book. There are so many in-depth, and he provides lots of examples in the repertoire, both at the beginning level and the advanced level of what he's talking about in each chapter. I love this so much. Let's jump to part 2. Part 2 is entitled Shaping Up a Performance. Now, in this particular part, he gets into the details, he gets into the overarching structure of things, and then seeing the big picture, he puts it all into perspective. Sometimes when we're practicing, right, we get really fixated on the details and we don't see how the patterns evolve over time and make this whole grand piece of music. So he gives tips, tools, and strategies how to accomplish shaping up a performance as you look at the whole picture of a particular piece. Of interest to me is the section called Technique of the Soul. Technique of the Soul. I love this. He gets into even method acting and really embodying the character and the emotional quality of each piece. This is something that is absolutely fascinating to me as we are interpreters, right? I'm not a composer. I'm an interpreter of the composer's message. And so to embody what the composer is trying to say through a particular piece and to communicate that with an audience is such a privilege. And it's such a demanding, holistic thing that it means that we need to develop the technique of the soul. I love this chapter. I'll leave it to you to read it. I also really enjoy the final chapter, the art of teaching and learning. As a teacher and as a pianist, we need to have a beginner's mind, don't we? As we come to our repertoire and we come to our students day after day, we have to come to the practice afresh. This is an incredible privilege to be a pianist. And it's an incredible privilege, doubly incredible privilege, to be a teacher of this great art. And so to come to this practice with a beginner's mind, understanding the legacy that we shepherd right now in this period of time and space, and we move the art form forward. I love this chapter. We need to be always learning and always teaching, sharing liberally with our students what we've learned, because we need to pass on from generation to generation that which we have been entrusted with. We've got an incredible legacy as pianists and piano teachers. So let's enter into each day and each lesson and each practice session with joy and anticipation and excitement and curiosity as to what we might share, as to what we might learn that day. So I can't highly recommend this book enough. You gotta go get it. Link in the description. So go ahead and get Boris Berman's Notes from the Pianist Bench, published in 2000. And it will change how you play and how you think about the piano. This is an excellent book. Go get it. Thanks so much for joining us today. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notifications and like this video. Give me lots of comments to consider as I develop this channel. Thanks so much. See you next time.